Now, one of the other problems that we might be faced with is trying to run audio from DAW, from Pro Tools, and from BaseHead at the same time. So depending on your audio setup, you may find that audio will only come out of Pro Tools or only come out of BaseHead, and you can't get both to play together. So in this circumstance, what we can do is we can pipe audio through from BaseHead into Pro Tools by using either Rewire or Source Nexus. It's recommended not to use the Pro Tools aggregate audio device because there can be some issues that can arise from that. So in order to use Rewire or Source Nexus, we would strongly recommend to have a look at Source Nexus because Rewire is quite an old protocol and it hasn't been updated or maintained for quite some years. There can be some issues in some circumstances. So we would strongly recommend to use Source Nexus as that is a modern replacement for Rewire. But first of all, I'm going to show how easy it is to get set up with Rewire, and then we'll have a look at how to do the same thing with Source Nexus. So first of all, in the DAW here, what we want to do is we want to make a track which is going to be dedicated to the Rewire channel. And so I've created an auxiliary track here. And if I open up the mixer for the auxiliary track and click on one of the insert slots here, I should be able to go to the multi-channel plugins. And if I scroll down to the instrument node here, we should find the BaseHead Rewire plugin. So this is installed when BaseHead is installed. So we just insert this onto our track here, and then we just select the channels that we want to receive from BaseHead. So for a standard stereo setup, if we just want to receive the stereo audio, just select the front, left, and right. This now makes this channel an input from BaseHead. Now, in order to tell BaseHead to output audio direct to the channel we've created in Pro Tools, we need to activate this button up here. This is the Rewire Enable button. Now, once this has been enabled, we should see that this glows up and it says down the bottom that it's enabled. Now, when we start playing audio, we will see that the audio peaks over here on the channel in Pro Tools. So basically, all the audio now is coming through onto a channel in Pro Tools. We can actually control the volume of that using the channel slider in Pro Tools. But this will play out whatever setup we have Pro Tools already configured to play out. Now, if you just can't get Rewire working or it's not working reliable for you, maybe consider Source Nexus. So Source Nexus is basically the modern replacement for Rewire. So you can go to source-elements.com. There is a free trial if you want to test it out and see how it works. There's both a Mac and a Windows version. So if you're interested in getting the Source Nexus driver and you are a BaseHead customer, so you do have one of the paid versions of BaseHead, you can contact us to get a little bit of a discount off of Source Nexus. Now, once you've installed Source Nexus, this will create the same type of plugin as Rewire. So if we go back into our Pro Tools after we've installed it and set it up, we just go into the multi-channel plugins again. This time under the other options here, we'll find the Source Nexus plugin down here. Now, in this case, we've got a send and a receive because Source Nexus can actually be used with pretty much any application. We can add it as a send device on one application, receive it to another. The send functionality is already built into BaseHead, so we have the send functionality built in. We're just interested in this receive option here, and by default, it sets itself up to receive audio automatically from the Source Nexus output. So there isn't any setup actually required. We just have it set up on our track. And now when we go back into BaseHead, we activate the Source Nexus option. And now when we start playing files, it will play out the Source Nexus output just as it did with Rewire. All right, so this is just a quick demonstration on how to use Soundflower to get audio between BaseHead and Pro Tools. So you can use this to get audio between BaseHead and any application. But this is just a bit of a demonstration on how to do this. There's no support that we offer, and it's not going to be a solution that's going to be usable for everyone out there, it does require the use of an aggregate audio device. So there are more reliable methods that we would recommend, such as using Rewire or Source Nexus. But for those that want to use Soundflower, want to find out how to pipe audio using the Soundflower driver, this might be of interest. So first of all, what we want to do is go to our web browser, and we want to go to a GitHub page for Matt and Gall's Soundflower. So this is now an open source project. So Soundflower used to be owned by a company. It's now an open source project, so it's completely free to use. If you've never used GitHub before, don't worry too much about anything going on here. There's just one simple link to download it. First thing that I would recommend is reading the information available here, because it specifically states that M1 chip-based Macs are not yet supported. So if you're using an M1 Mac, then this is not going to be a solution that's going to be usable at the moment. Over here on the right hand side, we want to just go to the latest release. So we want to just click on this latest release link here. And again, there's some information that we probably need to make sure that we understand. So specifically with this installer, even though the actual kernel driver is digitally signed, completely safe to install on your Mac, the actual installer isn't digitally signed. So Mac is going to block the installer from running. So even if you force run it, it will actually say that it's failed. What you then need to do is go into your security preferences. So if you go into the system preferences and then go to the security preferences here, you'll notice that once it's failed, it will actually pop up here and say that this application has failed. You just need to allow access to it. Once you've done that, you then need to run the application again, and then hopefully it will install. So again, there's no support from us on how to do this, or if you get stuck, rely on Google for that side of things. But once you've got the driver installed, so once you've run through the installation process, in the system preferences, what you should be able to do is go into sound, and then you should see that we have a Soundflower audio device here. So we've got a 2-channel and a 64-channel. We're only interested in the 2-channel version at this stage. So just be aware that you can pipe multiple channels out of one application into another if you want discrete audio channels from different tracks. But in our example, we're just going to be using a simple 2-channel setup. Now, the next thing we need to do once it's installed is we will need to go to our audio and MIDI setup. So just search if you can't find this screen. So the audio and MIDI setup is where we're going to create our aggregate device. So if you've never created an aggregate device in macOS before, it's very, very easy. It's quite simply a sort of a merging of multiple audio devices to create a single device. So what it allows us to do is to take multiple devices here and create a single device out of them so that we can use the inputs and outputs of multiple devices all at once. So for this example, what I'm going to do is create a brand new aggregate device. And here is where we need to select the devices that we want to merge together. So in this example, I want to merge my 2-channel Soundflower device. And I'm also using the external headphone output as my audio output device. So I select these two here and it will create a merging of these. So now I've got 2 inputs available from the Soundflower device, and I've got 2 outputs available from my external headphones as well as the Soundflower device. So technically I've got 4 outputs. Now I'd also recommend just renaming this so that we know what this device is. So I'm just going to call this Soundflower test. And this is all we need to do here. What we then need to do is switch over to our application. So I'm going to be using Pro Tools, and we need to configure this to be used in our Pro Tools session. Okay, so in Pro Tools, what we need to do first is we need to go up to the setup and then go to the playback engine. Now for the playback engine, we need to select the device that we just created. So you can see the Soundflower test that I've created is available here. So I'm going to select this one. And it's going to say that I need to restart my session. So I'm going to restart my session so that I can use this device. So if we just go back into the playback engine, we're using our aggregate audio device. Now, the next thing we might need to do is to just make sure that we're using the correct inputs and outputs in the session that we've created. So if we go to Setup, go down to I/O. The first thing is we need to make sure that our main device, our physical external interface is using the primary 1-2 output. So make sure that these are labeled here. And then Soundflower is going to be using the subsequent 3-4 outputs. On the input side of things, if it isn't already labeled as Soundflower, I've actually renamed this. It's a good idea just to label this. It might just be simply called in1-2. And it might be a good idea to just relabel these inputs if you've got multiple inputs available so that we know which ones are Soundflower input, which ones the ones for our audio interface. Because I'm using just the headphone output, I don't have any additional audio inputs available. Now, the first thing to check before we go any further is make sure that you've got playback happening in Pro Tools still. So if we click here, yep, playback is still happening. What we need to do is we actually need to create a auxiliary track. So at the very bottom of my session here, I've got an auxiliary track here. And what I'm going to do here is go to the input output section, and I'm going to go down to interface, and you can see here that my Soundflower input is selectable. So I'm going to select this as my input. And this is now going to receive any audio that I send out my Soundflower device through to this channel in my Pro Tools session. And now what that's left to do is to go into BaseHead and choose the Soundflower device as the audio output. So in BaseHead here, what we need to do is just go to the options page. And instead of using our audio device directly, we now want to use the Soundflower output, not the Soundflower aggregate device that we created. We're using that within our Pro Tools session. What we need to do is actually use the Soundflower 2-channel output. So this is the 2-channel auxiliary output. This is what's going to feed directly into our track in Pro Tools. And so now if I play back some audio out of here, maybe if I just turn this up a little bit. So we can see that we've got audio happening. And if you notice down the bottom here, we actually have audio coming in on our channel. So we can actually adjust the volume level there. And we now have audio piping straight out of BaseHead and straight into our Pro Tools session.